Have you ever noticed that the deepest wound is not caused by hatred, but by betrayal? Many people believe that empaths forgive everything because they are kind, patient, and understanding. But there is one boundary that, once crossed, changes everything forever. It is not revenge. It is not anger. It is the quiet moment when the heart stops asking for explanations and finally accepts the truth. Today, we will explore why the strongest empaths do not hold grudges, but why there is one point of no return that they never cross back from. Many people believe that an empath's greatest strength is the ability to understand others. They admire the patience, the compassion, the willingness to see beyond mistakes. But what most people fail to recognize is that every gift carries a responsibility. When understanding is not balanced with wisdom, it quietly becomes a burden. And burdens carried for too long begin to change the one who carries them. An empath naturally searches for reasons instead of excuses. When someone speaks harshly, the empath wonders what pain they must be carrying. When someone disappoints them, they think perhaps life has simply been difficult for that person. When promises are broken, they convince themselves that tomorrow will be different. This does not come from weakness. It comes from a heart that genuinely wishes to reduce suffering rather than create more of it. But there is a question that very few people ask themselves. While you are busy understanding everyone else's pain, who is understanding yours? There comes a dangerous moment when kindness slowly turns into self-neglect. It happens so quietly that you hardly notice it. You begin to silence your own feelings because someone else's emotions seem more urgent. You stop expressing disappointment because you do not want anyone to feel guilty. You lower your standards, not because they have changed, but because you fear losing the connection. Little by little, you become a stranger to yourself. This is how compassion, when left without boundaries, transforms into self-abandonment. The mind creates convincing stories. They did not mean it. They are under pressure. Everyone deserves another chance. Sometimes these thoughts are true. Sometimes people genuinely deserve grace. But wisdom asks another question. Is this person learning from the grace you continue to offer? Or are they simply becoming comfortable receiving it without changing? That question changes everything. Because real compassion does not ignore truth. It walks beside truth. If your kindness continually teaches someone that there are no consequences for hurting you, then your kindness is no longer serving love. It is serving fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of rejection. Fear of being alone. Many empaths mistake endurance for love. They believe that if they can just be patient enough, understanding enough, forgiving enough, the relationship will eventually become healthy. Yet a relationship cannot be healed by one person's awareness alone. Two people must be willing to grow. One person cannot carry the emotional weight for both. Notice how nature works. A tree offers shade to everyone, yet its roots remain firmly planted in the ground. It does not tear itself from the earth to follow those who sit beneath its branches. If it abandoned its roots, it would lose the very strength that allows it to give. Your compassion must be the same. The more you give, the deeper your roots in self-respect must become. Understanding another person is beautiful. Losing yourself while doing so is not. There is a profound difference between holding space for someone and sacrificing your own peace to keep them comfortable. One nourishes life, the other slowly drains it. And the tragedy is that many empaths do not realize how exhausted they have become until they no longer recognize the person they see in the mirror. Never confuse an open heart with an unguarded life. Your heart can remain soft while your boundaries become strong. In fact, only strong boundaries allow genuine kindness to survive. Without them, generosity becomes resentment, patience becomes exhaustion, and love becomes obligation. The first lesson is not to stop understanding others. The first lesson is to stop abandoning yourself while you do. There is something many people misunderstand about an empath. They believe that when an empath walks away, it must have been because love disappeared. But this is rarely the truth. Love often remains long after trust has begun to fade. That is why the deepest heartbreak is not always the loss of affection. It is the slow realization that the place where you once felt safe has become the place where you must constantly protect yourself. Trust does not vanish in a single moment. It rarely collapses because of one mistake. It is worn away little by little, like water carving through stone. A promise is broken. An apology is given. Hope returns. Then the same pattern repeats. Again, another explanation is offered. Again, another chance is given. At first, the heart is patient, because it believes growth takes time. And that is true. Real growth does take time. But there is a difference between someone who is growing and someone who is simply repeating. An empath notices this difference long before anyone else does. Not because they are suspicious, but because they pay attention to energy more than words. Words can be arranged to sound sincere. Promises can be spoken with great emotion, but energy always reveals consistency. It reveals whether actions are aligned with intentions. It reveals whether respect is genuine or merely convenient. This is why repeated dishonesty creates such a deep wound. The lie itself may hurt, but what hurts even more is what the lie destroys. Every deception forces the empath to question their own reality. They begin asking themselves, am I expecting too much? Am I being too sensitive? Did I misunderstand? Slowly, they stop trusting not only the other person, but also their own intuition. And when you lose confidence in your inner voice, you lose one of the most valuable guides you possess. Many people think betrayal is only something dramatic. They imagine great acts of disloyalty, yet betrayal often arrives quietly. It appears in small moments when someone repeatedly dismisses your feelings, ignores your boundaries, or chooses convenience over honesty. It is found in the pattern, not the single event. One drop of water does not flood a house. Thousands of unnoticed drops eventually do. The empath does not ignore these moments. They carry them silently. They reflect on them. They search for understanding. They ask difficult questions of themselves before they ever question another person. They wonder whether they have been unfair, whether they have misunderstood, whether they should simply be more patient. This is why many people believe the empath will never leave. From the outside, they appear endlessly forgiving. But what others cannot see is the quiet conversation happening within. Each disappointment leaves a small crack in the foundation of trust. Each broken promise weakens the bridge connecting two hearts. Eventually, there comes a moment when the empath is no longer trying to convince themselves that everything will improve. They simply see what has always been there. That moment is not filled with anger. It is filled with clarity. Clarity has a peaceful quality. It no longer argues with reality. It no longer bargains with false hope. It accepts what repeated actions have already demonstrated. The empath understands that love without trust becomes uncertainty. Conversation becomes caution. Presence becomes tension. Instead of feeling free, they begin measuring every word, preparing for the next disappointment before it even arrives. This is not love. This is survival. A relationship should be a place where your nervous system can rest, not where it must remain alert. Emotional safety is one of the greatest expressions of love. It allows you to be honest without fear, vulnerable without punishment, and authentic without pretending. When that safety disappears, affection alone cannot sustain the relationship. Love may still exist, but it no longer has a stable foundation on which to stand. So understand this clearly. An empath rarely reaches the end because of one painful event. They reach it after countless moments in which trust was asked to survive what respect could, not support. And once the heart realizes it is no longer safe, it quietly begins to let go long before the body ever walks away. When people imagine someone leaving, they often imagine raised voices, dramatic arguments, or a final confrontation filled with emotion. They believe every ending must announce itself loudly. But the strongest goodbyes are often the quietest. They happen long before anyone notices. By the time an empath physically walks away, they have already traveled a long distance within themselves. This is something many people fail to understand. They mistake silence for indifference. They think the empath has suddenly become cold or distant. Yet silence is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the presence of understanding. It is the moment when you realize that repeating the same conversation will not produce a different result. An empath does not stop speaking because they have nothing left to say. They stop speaking because they have already said everything that needed to be said. They have explained their feelings. They have expressed their needs with patience. They have offered understanding, compromise, and countless opportunities for change. Each conversation was not merely a complaint. It was an invitation to grow together, to listen more deeply, and to build something stronger. But invitations cannot force someone to enter. There comes a point when explaining yourself over and over becomes a form of begging, and your dignity was never meant to survive on someone else's willingness to finally understand you. Many people keep talking because they still believe words can change a heart that has already chosen not to listen. The empath eventually realizes something different. Understanding cannot be demanded. Respect cannot be negotiated. Awareness cannot be forced upon someone who is committed to remaining asleep. So they become quiet. This silence is often misunderstood as punishment. Others may wonder why the empath no longer argues, no longer defends themselves, no longer tries to correct misunderstandings. They may even accuse them of giving up too easily. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The silence arrives only after every sincere effort has been exhausted. Imagine standing before a closed door and knocking once. That is hope. Knocking twice is patience. Knocking many times is persistence. But if years pass and the door never opens, wisdom does not tell you to keep knocking forever. Wisdom tells you to recognize that some doors are closed because they were never meant to become your home. This realization changes the quality of your energy. Instead of chasing explanations, you begin protecting your peace. Instead of defending your intentions, you allow your actions to speak for themselves. Instead of trying to convince others of your worth, you quietly remember it yourself. There is tremendous strength in refusing to participate in endless cycles of conflict, not because you are avoiding discomfort, but because you understand that not every battle deserves your life force. Some arguments are not seeking truth. They are only seeking continuation. If you continue playing the same game, the outcome remains the same. Silence, then, becomes an act of discipline. It is the discipline to stop feeding what drains you. The discipline to let misunderstanding exist without feeling compelled to erase it. The discipline to accept that some people will never see you clearly, because doing so would require them to face themselves honestly. This does not mean you become bitter. It does not mean you close your heart to the world. It simply means you stop placing your peace in the hands of those who have repeatedly shown they cannot hold it with care. Many fear walking away because they believe it means failure. But sometimes leaving is the deepest expression of self-respect. It is the quiet acknowledgement that love should never require you to constantly abandon your own truth. You can wish someone well without continuing the journey beside them. You can release them without resentment. You can move forward without needing the final word. The loudest people often seek to win the argument. The wisest people seek to end the struggle within themselves. And when an empath finally becomes silent, it is not because they have stopped caring. It is because they have finally started protecting the peace they should never have traded away. One of the greatest misunderstandings about forgiveness is the belief that it requires you to return to the place where you were wounded. Many people confuse forgiveness with reconciliation, as though healing can only be proven by opening the same door again. But these are two very different paths. One is an inner decision. The other is a shared responsibility. You alone can choose forgiveness. Trust, however, can only be rebuilt when both hearts are committed to truth. An empath often struggles with this distinction because the heart naturally wants to believe in the goodness of others. It remembers the beautiful moments. It remembers the laughter, the promises, the dreams that were once shared. The heart whispers, perhaps this time will be different. And hope is a beautiful quality. Without hope, growth would be impossible. But hope without awareness becomes a trap. There is wisdom in asking yourself a simple question. Am I returning because the situation has truly changed? Or am I returning because I miss the person I hoped they would become? These are not the same. Many people fall in love with potential. They remain loyal to promises that were never fulfilled. They hold tightly to memories while ignoring the reality standing before them. An empath is especially vulnerable to this, because they can see who someone could become. They recognize hidden strengths, unspoken pain, and untapped kindness. But seeing potential does not mean potential has become reality. A seed contains the possibility of becoming a great tree, yet you cannot sit beneath its shade today. You must respond to what exists, not only to what might exist someday. Forgiveness begins when you stop carrying resentment through your life. Resentment is a heavy burden. It asks you to relive yesterday's pain every time you remember it. It steals today's peace in payment for yesterday's suffering. The person who hurt you may have already moved on, while your own mind continues carrying the weight. This is why forgiveness is first a gift you offer yourself. It is not saying that what happened was acceptable. It is not pretending the wound never existed. It is not denying your own experience. Forgiveness simply says, I refuse to let this pain become my identity. There is great freedom in that choice. But freedom does not require forgetfulness. Imagine placing your hand on a hot flame. You are burned. The wound heals with time, but the wisdom remains. You do not spend the rest of your life hating the fire. Neither do you keep placing your hand into the flames to prove that you have forgiven them. You respect what the experience has taught you. Life asks the same of every empath. Your experiences are not meant to make you fearful. They are meant to make you awake. Some people will apologize because they genuinely wish to change. Others will apologize because they wish to regain access to the version of you that accepted everything without question. The words may sound identical, but time always reveals the difference. Real change is patient. It does not demand immediate trust. It understands that broken things require careful rebuilding. Manipulation, however, becomes impatient. It expects yesterday's closeness to return without today's responsibility. An empath who has learned this lesson no longer rushes. They observe. They allow actions to speak longer than promises. They understand that consistency is the language of character. This does not make the heart colder. It makes the heart wiser. There is a quiet strength in being able to bless someone's journey without walking beside them. You can sincerely wish them healing, happiness, and growth, while also recognizing that your own path must continue elsewhere. There is no contradiction in this. Love does not always require proximity. Compassion does not always require access. The deepest forgiveness does not erase memory. It transforms memory into wisdom. The pain no longer controls your decisions, but the lesson continues to guide them. And that is how the heart remains open without becoming unprotected. Forgive completely if you choose, but never mistake healing for an invitation to return where your spirit learned it could no longer safely remain. There comes a moment in the life of every empath that cannot be forced, predicted, or hurried. It arrives quietly, after countless disappointments, endless reflection, and many nights spent questioning yourself. It is not the moment you stop loving someone. It is the moment you finally stop abandoning yourself for the sake of being loved. This is the point of no return. Many imagine this moment as something dramatic. They expect anger, resentment, or a desire to make the other person regret what they have done. But awakening rarely announces itself with noise. It arrives with stillness. One day you wake up, and the need to chase explanations is simply gone. The urge to prove your worth has disappeared. The desire to be chosen by those who repeatedly overlooked your value no longer controls your heart. This change surprises even the empath. For so long, your happiness depended on whether someone understood you, appreciated you, or finally changed. You invested enormous energy into believing that if you loved more deeply, communicated more clearly, or sacrificed more generously, everything would eventually become what you hoped it could be. Then something shifts. You begin to understand that peace was never waiting for another person's transformation. It was waiting for your own. This realization changes the direction of your life. Before, your attention was always outward. You watched people's moods. You anticipated their needs. You adjusted your behavior to avoid conflict. You carried responsibilities that were never yours to carry. Without noticing, you built your inner world around the emotional weather of others. If they were happy, you relaxed. If they were distant, you became anxious. If they were upset, you immediately searched for ways to fix what may not have been yours to fix. But eventually, you become exhausted. Not because kindness is exhausting, but because living disconnected from yourself always is. You realize that peace cannot grow where self-betrayal continues. Every time you ignored your intuition, every time you accepted less than your heart knew was healthy, every time you remained silent to keep someone else comfortable, you paid for temporary harmony with your own inner stability. The cost was simply too high. And so, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop asking, how can I make them stay? Instead, you begin asking, why have I been leaving myself? That single question opens a door that can never again be closed. You start listening to your own feelings with the same compassion you once reserved only for everyone else. You honor your fatigue instead of dismissing it. You respect your intuition instead of arguing with it. You recognize that your boundaries are not walls built against love. They are foundations upon which healthy love can finally stand. This is why the point of no return feels irreversible. It is not because your heart has become harder. It is because your awareness has become clearer. Once you truly see the difference between love and attachment, you cannot pretend not to know. Once you experience the calm that comes from respecting yourself, chaos loses its strange attraction. What once felt familiar now feels heavy. What once seemed impossible, choosing yourself, now feels completely natural. There will still be moments of sadness. Memories do not disappear simply because wisdom has arrived. There may be days when you remember the good times and wonder what could have been. That is part of being human. But those memories no longer pull you backward. They simply remind you how far you have come. You begin creating a life that no longer depends upon constant emotional rescue. Relationships become places of mutual respect rather than emotional survival. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer mistake inconsistency for mystery. You no longer believe that suffering is proof of devotion. Instead, you discover something far more valuable. You discover that peace has its own quiet strength. It does not demand attention. It does not need to prove itself. It simply exists. And once you have truly experienced it, you understand that no familiar pain is worth trading it away. That is why this becomes the point of no return. Not because you stop loving, but because you finally love yourself enough to never again exchange your inner peace for the comfort of what once felt familiar. As you continue walking this path, there is one final lesson that becomes more important than all the others. It is not enough to learn how to leave what harms you. It is not enough to recognize betrayal, establish boundaries, or choose peace over familiar pain. The deeper challenge begins after all of that. The question becomes this: can you protect your light without allowing the darkness you encountered to become part of you? Many people, after being hurt, make a silent promise to themselves. They decide they will never trust again. They will never open their heart again. They will never allow anyone to come close enough to disappoint them. At first, this feels like strength. It feels like protection. But if you look carefully, you will see that fear has simply disguised itself as wisdom. There is a great difference between becoming careful and becoming closed. A closed heart may avoid disappointment, but it also avoids connection. It avoids wonder. It avoids the quiet joy of being fully present with another human being. It begins to see every stranger as a threat, and every act of kindness as something suspicious. Life slowly becomes smaller, not because the world has changed, but because fear has become the lens through which everything is seen. This is not freedom. True wisdom never asks you to stop loving. It asks you to love with open eyes. There is a common belief that innocence can only exist once, that after enough pain, the heart must become hard to survive. But nature teaches us something different. Consider the river. It meets rocks throughout its entire journey. It does not stop flowing because obstacles appear. It does not become bitter toward the mountain that placed them there. Instead, it learns to move with greater intelligence. Sometimes it flows around the rocks. Sometimes it gently shapes them over time. Yet it never forgets its own nature. You are not here to become the rock. You are here to remain the river. This is why boundaries are so important. Many imagine boundaries as barriers meant to keep people out. But healthy boundaries are actually guides. They teach others how to walk beside you with respect. They protect what is valuable without hiding it. A garden surrounded by a fence does not exist because flowers hate the world. The fence exists because beauty deserves care. Your heart deserves that same care. Do not confuse kindness with unlimited availability. Do not believe compassion requires endless sacrifice. Real generosity is sustainable. It leaves enough energy for tomorrow. It nourishes both the giver and the receiver. If your kindness consistently leaves you empty while others remain unchanged, then something essential has been forgotten. Remember this. Every painful experience has placed a mirror before you. At first, you believed the mirror existed only to reveal the character of others. But as your awareness deepened, you discovered it was also revealing your own patterns. Where did you ignore your intuition? Where did you confuse fixing with loving? Where did you believe your worth depended upon being needed? These questions are not meant to create guilt. They are meant to awaken responsibility. Responsibility is not blame. It is the understanding that while you cannot control another person's choices, you are always responsible for how long you remain disconnected from your own truth. When you truly learn this, something extraordinary happens. You stop searching for people who will complete you because you no longer experience yourself as incomplete. You stop chasing validation because your value is no longer determined by another person's approval. You stop fearing endings because you understand that every ending creates space for a more honest beginning. Then your compassion changes. It becomes quieter. It becomes steadier. It no longer rushes to rescue everyone. Instead, it offers presence without carrying what belongs to someone else. It loves without clinging. It forgives without forgetting wisdom. It remains open without becoming vulnerable to every passing storm. This is the strength that cannot be taken from you. Not the strength that comes from controlling others, but the strength that comes from mastering yourself. The world will always contain people who misunderstand you, disappoint you, or fail to honor your heart. You cannot prevent that, but you can choose that none of those experiences will turn you into someone who abandons their hellstate. Protect your peace. Guard your heart with wisdom. Let your kindness remain alive, but let your self-respect stand beside it. For the greatest victory is not walking away from those who hurt you. It is walking forward, without ever losing the light that has always been yours.